U.S. President, or rather former U.S. President Bill Clinton, has delivered his opening statement before the United States House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. In his opening remarks, the former president outlined the nature and timeline of his past interactions, maintaining he had no knowledge of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's criminal conduct at the time. It also comes after his wife Hillary Clinton testified behind closed doors yesterday. Earlier this month, the House Oversight Committee recommended that the Clintons be held in contempt for allegedly refusing to testify about their relationship with the disgraced financier. Bill Clinton's name appears in a recently released collection of government documents linked to Epstein. His wife has also defended him, saying her husband's contact with Epstein ended several years before any of Epstein's crimes became publicly known. Now, to unpack this story and more, I'm joined live by Newzroom Afrika's correspondent, Simon Marks. Simon, it's been quite a busy week in the US, but I also want to concentrate a bit in Congress. I mean, Simon, beyond the political theatre, what was the most consequential policy signal in the State of the Union address this week?
Well, I think it's fair to say, Nhlanhla, that there were not very many specific policies that the president outlined in terms of his desire to get any congressional backing or to present any congressional legislation that he wants to see passed. He definitely intends to continue governing as an executive president. I think the biggest takeaway from that speech was President Trump doubling down on tariffs. Remember that a week ago today, he suffered a massive reverse at the hands of the US Supreme Court, accused two of the justices who voted against his tariffs of treachery, said he was ashamed of them because he had personally nominated them to the court. And that court decision last Friday eviscerated most of the tariffs that he has put into place against the country's trading partners since he returned to office in January of last year, saying that the president had acted unconstitutionally, that he did not have the executive authority under the emergency law that he used to implement those tariffs to go about setting trade policy through tariffs. Remember that the US Constitution says that Congress uniquely has the power to impose and regulate tariffs. So on the face of it, that was a huge rejection of not just the central pillar of President Trump's trade policy, but as we all know, the central pillar of his foreign and national security policies as well. Indeed, in the State of the Union address, he said that had it not been for his ability to threaten countries with tariffs, he wouldn't have been able to solve the 8 wars that he falsely claims that he has solved, because most of them weren't actually full-blown wars. But nonetheless, that gave an indication of the centrality in his thinking about the importance of tariffs in everything that he does, where past US administrations have used sanctions to cajole and threaten countries that they don't like. This administration uses tariffs in exactly the same way. And anyone, whether it was an exporter in South Africa or an importer here in the United States, now looking for refunds of $150 billion of duties that the Trump administration has collected since those tariffs were imposed, anybody looking for any suggestion that the president is moving in a different direction will have been very disappointed. He doubled down, insisting that he's still got the capacity to use what he described as approved and tested statutes to determine tariff policy himself. And so there was very little clarity on what all of that means to the country's trading partners around the world, including, of course, South Africa. It is apparent that the importers who want to get billions of dollars back from the US government are basically being told by President Trump, you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to fight us in court for them. And the president himself indicated that he thought that those court battles could take as long as 5 years to be resolved.
Simon, let's also concentrate on the story that we opened this discussion with. Can you summarize the Oversight Committee's investigation, especially into Jeffrey Epstein and the role of the Clintons in this inquiry? What has that been like?
So the House Oversight Committee, as you observe, is the congressional committee that is probing Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, but also, of course, his relationship with the wealthy and the powerful. And as of January the 30th, they had 3 million pages of documents to go through, that massive document dump by the Department of Justice that Democrats on the committee and some dissident Republicans argue did not fulfill the terms of the law, which requires the Justice Department to hand everything over that it's got. There are claims by Democrats that the Justice Department is still sitting on 3 million more pages of evidence. Where the Clintons come into this is that the Republicans, who of course control the committee because they are in the majority on Capitol Hill, are making have made massive efforts over the last few months to drag the Clintons before the committee. Now, Hillary Clinton testified yesterday, and as she's been saying for months, told the committee she has nothing to tell them. She never met Jeffrey Epstein. She recollects no meeting with him, never travelled to his homes, never visited his offices, never went to the island in the Caribbean, none of that stuff. So her message to the committee was, I can't tell you anything about Epstein, but I know a guy who can, and his name is President Donald Trump, and he's the man you should be hauling before your committee. Of course, Republicans don't want to hear that message, and there's not a snowball's chance that while they remain in the majority in the House of Representatives that they will seek to take evidence from Donald Trump about his friendship with the committee. Bill Clinton, still testifying right now up in New York, is in graver jeopardy because he did have a relationship with Epstein. And in fact, one member of the committee has just come out to tell the press during a break that former President Clinton is giving very long, deliberative answers to the questions that he is being asked, and that Democrats on the committee say they have not shied away from asking him difficult questions, because remember, we've seen pictures of Bill Clinton accompanied by women whose identities have been redacted. We have no idea who they are, that do demonstrate, that there was a relationship between Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein. The former president insists nothing criminal, nothing nefarious. He said in his opening statement that if he had known then what he knows now about Epstein, he would have personally turned him over to the Department of Justice. So, huge pushback from Bill Clinton on any suggestion that he did anything wrong, but he's got a more complicated wicket to bat on than Hillary Clinton because he demonstrably met Jeffrey Epstein and had a friendship with him.
Yeah. Let's return to the President's State of the Union address. President Trump said that the U.S. is thriving, Simon, yet his approval rating remains under pressure. What are the voters seeing that the White House isn't acknowledging at this point?
Well, what they saw on Tuesday night with the State of the Union was the opening salvo being fired by President Trump in the midterm election campaign, and this dramatic moment when he put immigration, illegal immigration, front and centre into his speech, and he challenged every lawmaker in the room to stand up if you agree with the statement, the first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal immigrants. Republicans all leapt to their feet. Democrats sat on their hands. He said he was ashamed of them. He told the viewing public that the Democrats are crazy. They're crazy, these people. Now, there was a tremendous amount of audacity in what Donald Trump was doing there, because he knows that 2 American citizens died at the hands of his brutal Border Patrol and ICE agents on the streets of Minneapolis only last month. So the idea that he's been defending American citizens can and is very much vehemently questioned by Democrats. He is completely underwater in the polls. The Washington Post survey this week showed 63% of the country disapproves of what he's doing. A CNN survey said 60% of the country disapproves, and 73% of independent voters, floating voters, people who make their minds up with each passing election, 73% disapproval among independent voters. He cited the soaring stock market as evidence of the country's economic prosperity, but the voters don't feel it because They can look at the value of their retirement funds and see those values increasing, but they can't access that money until they turn 59 and a half. They've got to go shopping this weekend. They've got to fill the car up with petrol. They might be thinking about taking the kids out for a day in the country. I mean, those real expenses that they have to pay for every single day is what is sticking in their craw. And the president, I think, did not really succeed in saying to the country effectively that he feels and understands their pain. That's the biggest challenge he's got between now and November. And Democrats, of course, talk all the time about affordability. It is the big buzzword for them, laser focused. Their representative said this week after the State of the Union is how she described Democrats in terms of prioritizing the economy on the campaign trail.
Yeah. Was the speech about governing or about survival ahead of the midterms?
Well, the speech, I think, actually, and was quite surprising in a sense, in that it really challenged the view of those Democrats who have been saying, and other critics, who have been saying, he's slowing down, he's lost his way, he's suffering from ailments that the White House hadn't disclosed, it's all over for him. And I have to say that if you look at the president who showed up for the State of the Union address, even though it was the longest State of the Union speech any president has ever given, it was a very disciplined, carefully crafted performance filled with made-for-TV moments, as, you know, Donald Trump uniquely can get away with. And he was completely different from the man who just a month ago showed up and gave a rambling press conference that lasted for over 2 hours in the White House to mark the first anniversary of his return to power. I mean, if you put those two men side by side and watch them, it almost looks like they're two different human beings. So the real question here is, did he succeed in chiseling away at some of the deficit in his polling ratings? And there's some evidence to suggest that he might have done himself a favour with that speech. But can he repeat it? Can he do it again and again and again on the campaign trail? Which is exactly the same question, because I remember having this conversation back in 2024 that we were having here on Newzroom Afrika about Joe Biden. He gave an electrifying performance at the State of the Union that campaign year, and you wondered, can he do it again and again and again? And the answer, of course, was that he couldn't. Let's see what Donald Trump does.
Let's see what Donald Trump does. But on Iran, when the president warns about missile capability but speaks of diplomacy in the same breath, is that strategic balance or mixed messaging, Simon?
Well, there's an inherent contradiction in everything that the administration is saying about Iran. This is the administration that last July claimed that President Trump's use of bunker-busting munitions in Iran had obliterated the country's nuclear program. They bombed it back to the Stone Age. Now, suddenly, Americans are being told by the president's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, that the Iranians are a week away from being in a position to rebuild that nuclear program. The president himself claimed, without providing any supporting evidence in the State of the Union, that Iran has the capacity already to send missiles that can attack European cities, and is developing the capacity to attack the United States. Now, we've learnt here today that Secretary of State Marco Rubio is heading to Israel next week for talks. And that is being taken here as an indication that we are perhaps not going to see US military action against Iran this weekend. Talks in Geneva have continued all week long. Steve Witkoff had a face-to-face meeting, direct talks with the Iranian foreign minister at some point on Thursday. Prior to that, all the talks had been indirect, going through third parties. But the United States has assembled its most powerful military force in the region since President George W. Bush invaded Iraq in 2003. And so the president still has the capacity, obviously, to authorize military action. And there is one other possibility, that the Israelis launch a first strike against Iran. even while the Americans are saying, well, hang on a second, Rubio's on his way to Israel for talks. The talks in Geneva are continuing. So I think it's still a very, very febrile point. But what Americans don't know, because the president hasn't told them and explained it to them, is what the purpose of military action would be, how long it might take, and what the reason is for it. None of that has yet been adequately explained.
Simon, as always, we do appreciate your insights as the political temperature rises ahead of the midterms. Questions around the economy, foreign policy and transparency